There's 4 countries which are fluoridated on that graph, and 14 that are unfluoridated. Can you tell the difference? And if you go to the end, if you go to the figures at around 2000, you can see there's a great cluster. You cannot tell the difference in tooth decay in 12-year-olds, whether that 12-year-old has grown up in a fluoridated country or a non-fluoridated country. Look at this, if we compare US states. These are the US states, 50 of them, in order of the percentage of the population drinking fluoridation. So at this end here, here, 1, that's the state of Hawaii that has very little fluoridation outside the army camps. And at the other end, you've got the District of Columbia, which is 100% fluoridated. And in between, you've got percentages ranging from 10 to, say, 90%. Now, our Department of Health and Human Services issued a questionnaire which went out to 50 states. And one of the questions on that questionnaire was, do your children have very good or excellent teeth? And here's the answer, yes, from families of low income. This is the answer, yes. My child has very good or excellent teeth. It's flat. Can you see a relationship? It's a rather noisy line, but can you see a relationship between the shape of that line and the shape of the other line? Does it bear any relationship to the percentage of the population drinking fluoridated water? I don't think so. It's even clearer with the families of high income. There you see it's flat, there's less noise. About 80% of those families throughout the United States said their children's teeth was very good or excellent. There is absolutely no relationship between those answers and the percentage of the state population drinking fluoridated water. But you can see a relationship there, can't you? You can see that tooth decay reflects poverty. The lower income that you have, the more likely that you're going to have poor teeth because of poor diet and other factors which go hand in hand with poverty. So that's the issue. And if you don't control for income levels, when you're comparing 2 towns, you can get any result that you want. If we compare US communities, this was the largest survey ever conducted in the United States. It cost the taxpayers nearly $4 million. They looked at the teeth of over 39,000 children in 84 communities. And what they found was that the average tooth decay for 5 to 17-year-olds, for children who had always lived in non-fluoridated communities, it was 3.4 decayed, missing, and filled surfaces. There are between 4 and 5 surfaces to a tooth. The top 6 cutting teeth, the bottom 6 cutting teeth have 4 surfaces. All the rest have 5 surfaces. So we're talking about less than 1 tooth with 3.4 decayed, missing, and filled surfaces. If you look at children on the right who'd lived all their lives in a fluoridated community, it was 2.8 decayed, missing, and filled surfaces. If we subtract those two, we see that the magnificent saving of this practice amounts to 0.6 of 1 tooth surface out of 128 tooth surfaces by the time all the teeth have erupted in a children's mouth. Now bear that in mind, that all the angst on fluoridation, all the concerns about the health effects, which I'm going to talk about later, are all going to happen in order to achieve a magnificent saving of 0.6 of 1 tooth surface. I would like to build a giant statue in Chicago at the headquarters of the ADA, which has a big tooth on it, and 0.6 of that tooth would be gold or platinum. And we could all go there and worship at the foot of this magnificent statue for saving us 0.6 of a tooth surface, whilst at the same time they probably damaged our bones, brains, and thyroid gland. But I'll get to that in a moment. Before we get to that, they didn't even publish the statistics on this. They didn't even demonstrate that this 0.6 was actually statistically significant, nor did they adjust for delayed eruption of teeth. It's thought, there's mixed studies on this, but it's thought by many that fluoride actually delays the eruption of teeth. And if you're looking at, say, a 6-year-old, and that 6-year-old in the fluoridated community has less teeth erupted, obviously you're going to have less tooth decay, right? And that, you've got to account for that. Well, when a gentleman down in Texas actually did adjust for that, he said, let's assume there's a 1-year delay. The curves are shifted over. There is no difference. If you allow for a 1-year delay in tooth eruption, there is no difference between those figures across the whole range, 5 to 17. But how many health risks would you take to say 0.6 of one tooth surface, which amounts to one filling? Or if you like, it's one tooth surface between two people. Studies in Australia have found even less saving than 0.6. One study done in 2 states, Queensland and Western Australia, found a saving of between 0.12 and 0.3 of one permanent tooth surface. So we'd have to have a different statute in Australia. But wait a minute, hold the statute for a moment, because a more recent study found no statistically significant difference in tooth decay in the permanent teeth between children in South Australia who had drunk fluoridated water all their lives and those who had drunk bottled water or tank water. And yet the authors of that study went on radio and recommended the addition of fluoride to bottled water. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible. By the way, they're funded by Colgate, so that might explain part of this. There was a review of the literature done by David Locker, who sadly passed away last year, from the University of Toronto for the Ontario Ministry of Health. And he found that the magnitude of fluoridation's benefit was not large in absolute terms, is often not statistically significant, and may not be of clinical significance. And important recent studies. Now, there's a big study done in Europe by Komarak, and he did control for the delayed eruption of teeth. And it's not difficult to do, by the way. You just divide the tooth decay by the number of teeth that have erupted. Okay, so you've normalized it per tooth. And he found no difference. No difference in tooth decay between the fluoridated kids and the fluoridated and non-fluoridated communities. And an even more recent study in 2009, a big study from Iowa, they measured tooth decay as a function of how much fluoride the kid had actually swallowed. They estimated how much the kid had swallowed from toothpaste, from water, and so on. And again, they found no relationship between tooth decay and the amount of fluoride ingested. But should we be surprised? No. We shouldn't be surprised, because they've already told us that it works topically. So why would we expect to find differences when people swallow fluoride in these communities? As I said, fluoridation should have ended in 1999. Now, I should say that all those studies that I have cited, all of them, were done by pro-fluoridation dental researchers. Not one single study that I've cited so far has been done by an opponent of fluoridation. It's their own studies indicate that fluoridation does not work. Or if the benefits are there, they're minuscule. And that's why I say that these people in the health department that go out like a broken gramophone record and say it's safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective, haven't read the literature. They haven't even read the dental literature. Because if they had, they wouldn't do that. But I think the problem is that for the people in these health departments, which are in the middle level of bureaucracy, you don't challenge policy in the middle levels of bureaucracy. Policy is king. And if these people, these local people, were tomorrow to come out against fluoridation, they would lose their jobs. You can ask them. Ask Dr. Pollitt, how long would you hold your job if you were to tell the people of London that fluoridation was not safe or effective and should be stopped? He'd probably tell you, I'd probably last 1 day. So he's just obeying orders. I've heard that somewhere before. Okay, let's get on with the adequate. There is no adequate margin of safety. These are 3 words you'll never hear come out of the mouths of people that are pro-fluoridation. Margin of safety. They know that fluoridation is dead the moment you do a margin of safety calculation, and that will become clear as we go through the following. Now, the harmful effects of fluoride were documented in this study that was published in 2006. It's a 507-page study. It was conducted in the United States. It took 3.5 years. It was conducted by the first balanced panel ever selected to look at fluoridation and fluoride. Actually, they looked at fluoride's toxicity, not fluoridation per se, but fluoride in drinking water. They had people on this panel who were pro-fluoridation, people on this panel that were anti-fluoridation, and the majority had never taken a position. They expected to take 1 year on this. It took them 3.5 years. It is the most comprehensive study conducted to date anywhere in the world on fluoride's toxicity. I have the great pleasure to tell you that I was the only anti-fluoridation scientist that was invited to give testimony in person to this panel. They gave me 45 minutes immediately after the Center of Disease Control. I'm happy also to tell you that most of what I told them, and I've been telling communities around the world, has worked its way into this report. All the papers that I cited are now cited in here, so I was not so very far off mark. Now, in this report, again, let's be clear about this. I'm talking now about the harmful effects of fluoride, not necessarily the harmful effects of fluoridation. That will come later. They found that fluoride causes dental fluorosis. They knew that. Everybody's known that since 1931, that fluoride causes dental fluorosis. More about that in a moment. Secondly, it causes brain damage. Thirdly, it lowers thyroid function. Fourthly, it accumulates in the human pineal gland and lowers melatonin production in animals. It causes bone damage. It may cause osteosarcoma, which is a frequently fatal bone cancer in young men. So fluoridation may actually be killing people. Not many, but how many teeth would you have to save to justify one child dying of osteosarcoma? Maybe Dr. Pollock will tell us that. Some people are very sensitive to very low levels of fluoride. Okay, so let's go through some of these. Dental fluorosis. The early promoters of fluoridation thought that at 1 part per million fluoride, they could limit dental fluorosis to 10% of children, but only in its very mild form, a form that was so mild, little white opaque patches on the cusp of the teeth, that only dentists would be able to recognize this. And they thought that was a trade-off. We reduce tooth decay, but we wouldn't cause too much dental fluorosis. Well, let's look at the figures from that same massive review by the National Institute of Dental Research. Nearly 30% of kids in fluoridated communities in the United States had dental fluorosis. This is in 86, 87, reported in 97. Now, you also see that over 20% in communities in non-fluoridated communities, between 0.3 and 0.7, this is natural fluoride. And communities less than 0.3 were getting 13.5% dental fluorosis. And if you break down the figures, look at the yellow line there, 22.5% were very mild, that's category 1, 5.8% were mild, and 1.3% were moderate. And thank goodness none were severe. And remember, they only wanted 10% in its very mild form. Now, this is what it looks like. Very mild ranges from little white patches on the cusp of the teeth up to 25% of the tooth surface impacted. That's one at one range. That's up to 25% impacted. Mild, notice the words, by the way, mild is up to 50% impacted with these opaque white patches. And moderate impacts 100% of the tooth surface, and this impacts over 1 in 100. It not only impacts 100% of the tooth surface, it tends to get discolored and with indentations. And amongst other things, that causes psychological